The rain poured relentlessly, pounding down on the muddy ground where a small, trembling girl huddled beneath a tattered blanket. Her tiny body shivered uncontrollably as tears mixed with the cold drops streaming down her face. Her hands clutched her knees tightly, trying to hold herself together, but her sobs broke free, echoing through the desolate streets. "Please," she whimpered, voice trembling. "Please don't leave me. I'm hungry. I'm cold." Her voice cracked in despair, desperate for someone, anyone, to hear her plea. Suddenly, the footsteps approached, harsh, angry, unforgiving. The evil stepmother's voice cut through the rain like a whip. "Get away from me, you useless burden," she spat, kicking the girl aside without a second thought. "You're nothing but a problem. I don't care if you cry. You're a curse." The girl's small frame was pushed into the mud, her face streaked with tears and dirt, as the woman turned her back and stormed away, leaving her alone in the storm's fury. Her cries grew louder, more frantic, as she crawled into a corner of the alley, clutching her stomach, which ached with hunger. Her eyes darted around desperately for help, for kindness, but all she saw was the empty, rain-soaked streets. "Please," she begged again, voice barely more than a whisper. "Someone help me. I can't do this anymore." Her voice cracked with exhaustion, her little hands trembling as she tried to stand, only to fall back into the cold mud. Time blurred into an endless nightmare. The rain washed away her tears, but not the pain. Her body was weak, trembling from hunger and cold, her little feet bare and scraped from wandering the unforgiving streets. She begged silently for someone to hear her, to save her from this nightmare, but silence was her only reply. The darkness seemed to swallow her whole, her cries fading into the storm's roar. Then, in the midst of the chaos, something extraordinary began to happen. A glow appeared, not from the sky, but from within her, a warm light flickering faintly in her chest. The rain seemed to slow as a gentle, comforting presence settled around her. The girl's tear-streaked face lifted, and her eyes widened in awe as she felt an unexplainable peace washing over her, an indescribable warmth in her coldest moment. And suddenly, standing before her was a figure, radiant, gentle, full of love and compassion, Jesus himself. His eyes shone with kindness, his voice soft and soothing as he knelt beside her. "Little one," he whispered, reaching out with a tender hand, "you are loved beyond measure. Do not be afraid." His presence was like a balm to her battered soul, a beacon of hope in her darkest hour. As he gently lifted her into his arms, the rain continued to fall, but it no longer felt harsh or cold. It was as if the storm itself had paused, waiting for this moment of grace. The girl looked up at Jesus, her tiny face filled with wonder and trust, feeling an overwhelming sense of safety she had never known before. In that instant, everything changed. The pain, the abandonment, the suffering, all seemed to melt away in the presence of pure love. She was no longer alone, no longer forgotten. The darkness that had threatened to swallow her was met with a light so bright it pierced through the storm, revealing that something greater than suffering was about to unfold. This was just the beginning. The world was about to witness a miracle, one that would remind everyone that even in the depths of despair, hope and love can shine through, transforming the most broken of hearts into something beautiful and divine. The little girl's journey to this heartbreaking moment was paved with neglect, injustice, and cold indifference. Born with a disability that made walking difficult, she had always faced a world that seemed to forget her existence. Her small frame, fragile and vulnerable, carried the weight of a life often overlooked. Her parents' love had been a distant memory. Her mother had disappeared long before, leaving her in the hands of her stepfather and stepparent, who viewed her as an inconvenience, a burden that disrupted their lives. Her stepmother, a woman devoid of compassion, saw her as nothing more than a problem to be ignored or discarded. The girl's disability was a constant reminder of her inadequacy in her eyes. Whenever she attempted to reach out, to seek comfort or understanding, she was met with cold words or silence. The woman's heart seemed hardened by her own frustrations, and instead of nurturing, she chose neglect. When the girl fell or struggled to get around, her stepmother's response was harsh reprimands or indifference. There was no patience, no kindness, only a relentless push for her to be more normal, whatever that meant. Her stepfather, a man who worked long hours and rarely paid attention to the girl's needs, was no help. When he was home, he often dismissed her with a dismissive glance or a tired sigh. He saw her as an obstacle, a problem that disturbed the peace of his life. The girl's small world was full of coldness, silence, and unkindness, a stark contrast to what a child's world should be. She longed for love, for someone to see her for who she truly was, but all she received was neglect wrapped in silence. One day, her stepmother decided she was too much, a burden that needed to be gotten rid of. With a cruel smile, she made up her mind to abandon her in the pouring rain, in a deserted alley where no one would see. The girl, exhausted from a day of neglect and emotional pain, was led outside in her flimsy clothes, soaked through within moments. Her tiny hands reached out, trembling, clutching at the dirt and mud, begging for mercy. "Please," she whispered, voice trembling with desperation. "Don't leave me. I don't want to be alone. I'm cold. I'm hungry." Her cries echoed into the empty night, but her words fell on deaf ears. As the rain soaked her through, she was pushed aside and forgotten. Her stepmother turned her back, walking away without a second glance, leaving her small, broken body in the muddy street. Her tears mixed with the rain, and her trembling sobs grew faint as she curled into a ball, feeling utterly abandoned. Her voice, once filled with hope and innocence, was now cracked and hollow. She begged silently for someone, anyone, to come and save her, but the only answer was the deafening sound of thunder and the relentless rain. In that moment of despair, her suffering seemed endless. She was starved for love, for kindness, for safety. Her body ached from cold and hunger, her spirit battered by the injustice she endured at the hands of those supposed to care for her. She had been discarded like trash, forgotten in the storm's fury, left to suffer alone in a world that seemed to have turned its back on her. Her small voice, full of pain and pleading, faded into the darkness, swallowed by the rain and the silence. But just when hope seemed lost, something extraordinary happened. A gentle light appeared, warm and luminous, piercing through the storm's chaos. It was as if the very heavens had opened, and from within that divine glow, a figure emerged, radiant, full of love and compassion. Jesus appeared before her, kneeling softly in the rain, his eyes filled with tenderness and understanding. The girl looked up, her tear-streaked face filled with awe and wonder, sensing that she was not alone. Something greater than her suffering was about to change everything. This moment was born from a long history of neglect, pain, and injustice, but it was also the beginning of a miracle. It was a reminder that even amid the deepest suffering, there exists a love so powerful it can transform despair into hope. The child's story was about to take a turn, one that would reveal that no pain is too great for divine love to heal, and that even in the darkest night, there is a light that will never fade. The little girl's life had become a relentless cycle of pain and abandonment, each day worse than the last, leaving her with no hope of escape. She was small, fragile, and disabled, yet she endured acts of cruelty that stripped away her dignity and crushed her spirit. It started with small cruelties, being ignored when she stumbled or cried, pushed aside when she reached out for comfort. But those acts of neglect quickly turned into something far more brutal. One day, her stepmother, filled with frustration and anger, grabbed her roughly by the arm and threw her out of the house into the pouring rain. The girl's tiny body tumbled onto the muddy ground, her fragile limbs trembling from the fall and the cold sting of the rain. She cried out for help, tears mixing with the rainwater on her face, but no one responded. Her stepmother's voice echoed behind her, harsh and dismissive. "You're nothing but a burden," she sneered. "Get out and stay out. I don't want to see your face again." The girl curled up in the mud, shivering, feeling abandoned and forsaken. Her pleas for mercy were ignored, her small hands trembling as she tried to crawl back toward the house, but the door slammed shut behind her. Then the suffering intensified. Days passed, and her hunger grew unbearable. Her stepmother refused to give her food, leaving her to starve in the cold alley. She watched other children in the neighborhood receiving meals, warmth, and love, but she was denied even the basic necessity of sustenance. Her tiny stomach ached with hunger, and her body weakened, yet she clung to hope, hope that someone would notice her pain. But no one came. Instead, her stepmother's insults grew harsher, calling her useless, a curse, and a burden on everyone's life. Each insult cut deeper than the last, stripping her dignity and making her feel unworthy of any kindness. One evening, her stepfather arrived home, drunk and angry. Instead of comforting her, he grabbed her roughly by the shoulders and struck her across the face. "You're a problem," he yelled. "A disgrace to this house. Get out of my sight." The girl's small body was pushed down the stairs, her fragile limbs unable to defend her. She fell hard onto the cold stone floor, pain shooting through her. She cried out, begging for mercy, but her cries went unheard. Her stepmother, standing nearby with a cold smile, watched as she was beaten and humiliated. The beatings continued in the days that followed, each worse than before. She was slapped, kicked, and insulted every time she failed to meet impossible expectations. Her disability made her slow, clumsy, and easy to target. Her stepmother, filled with hatred, would often call her stupid, broken, or worthless, as she threw her into walls or shoved her into corners. The girl's world became a nightmare of neglect and cruelty. Every moment was a test of her endurance, with no one to protect her, no place to run. The pain of abandonment and abuse piled on top of each other, each act more vicious than the last, each one pushing her closer to despair. Her cries echoed into the night, unheard and unheeded. She felt trapped in a cycle of suffering from which there was no escape. And yet, amid this darkness, the sky suddenly seemed to crack open. A gentle, warm light appeared, a divine presence that reached into her battered soul. In that moment, the girl felt a peace she had never known, as Jesus appeared before her, radiating love and compassion. His eyes held understanding, and his presence filled her with a hope that pierced through the pain. The suffering she endured was overwhelming, but now she saw that something greater was about to change everything. Her story, filled with cruelty and neglect, was about to be touched by a miracle, a reminder that love and salvation can come even in the deepest suffering. The rain continued to pour mercilessly, pounding down on the girl's trembling figure in the desolate street. Her tiny body, soaked through, shivered uncontrollably as her tears mixed with the cold water streaming down her face. Her small hands, once clutching desperately at the mud and dirt, now lay limp at her sides, trembling from exhaustion and despair. Every breath she took was shallow, her chest rising and falling with labored effort, as if the very life inside her was beginning to fade. She had been pushed, insulted, beaten, and abandoned, her suffering reaching a point so unbearable that it felt impossible to go on. Her limbs ached from the cold, her stomach a hollow ache of hunger that she could no longer ignore. Her mind was hazy, overwhelmed by pain, confusion, and the relentless storm around her. She had begged for mercy, called out for help, but her cries were swallowed by the thunder and the rain, unheard and ignored by a world that had turned its back. Her voice cracked and broke as she tried to shout once more, but only a faint whisper escaped her trembling lips. "Please, someone help me," she rasped, her voice barely more than a whisper lost in the roar of the storm. Her head bowed in exhaustion, and a faint, trembling gasp escaped her lips. Her body finally gave in, her knees buckled, and she collapsed onto the cold, muddy ground, curling into a tiny ball as if trying to shield herself from the entire world. Her cheeks were streaked with dirt and tears, her face contorted in a mixture of pain and helplessness. Her breathing was shallow now, each breath a struggle, her body too weak to resist the cold. She shivered so violently that her teeth chattered, her small frame trembling as though she might shatter into pieces. Every part of her screamed for relief, for someone to come and save her, but the streets remained silent. No one was coming. No one was there. The darkness of despair threatened to swallow her whole. It seemed as if the entire universe had abandoned her in this moment. Her cries faded into a muffled whimper as her eyelids fluttered, her vision dimming from hunger and exhaustion. Her tiny hands clutched her stomach, which was empty and aching beyond words. Her body was trembling so violently that she could hardly keep herself upright. Yet she could not move, could not speak, could not call out again. She was utterly alone, abandoned in the cold rain, her suffering reaching a peak so intense it felt like a final, crushing weight on her broken spirit. The world around her seemed to blur into darkness, the storm's fury deafening her fading senses. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat a painful reminder of her helplessness. Was no one going to help? Was there no sign of mercy or kindness in this endless night? Her tears mixed with the rain as she lay there, her small body trembling and weak, her spirit on the verge of breaking. The pain, the hunger, the cold, everything pressed down on her, suffocating her hope. And just when she thought she couldn't endure another moment, when her eyelids fluttered and her breath grew shallow, something extraordinary happened. A gentle light began to shine through the storm, illuminating her battered face and the darkened street. It was as if heaven itself had opened, and a divine presence was approaching. Her trembling eyelids lifted just slightly as she looked toward the glow, her vision blurred but her heart sensing something divine and loving. And there, before her, appeared Jesus, radiant and full of compassion. His eyes, filled with tenderness and understanding, looked directly into hers. His presence was both calming and powerful, a balm for her battered soul. In that instant, everything seemed to pause, the rain, the thunder, the pain, all fading into the background. The girl's trembling body relaxed just a little as Jesus knelt beside her, gently reaching out with a loving hand. Her exhausted eyes widened in awe and wonder, her trembling breath catching in her throat. She felt an unexplainable warmth, a peace that she had never known in all her suffering. The darkness that had threatened to consume her was suddenly pierced by a divine light, a sign that she was not forgotten, that she was loved beyond measure, even in her most desperate moment. In that fragile moment of despair, she was about to discover that she was not alone, that something greater than her pain was about to change everything. The rain continued to pour, drenching the girl in cold, relentless torrents. Her tiny body, soaked and trembling, lay motionless on the muddy street, her head bowed low, eyes staring blankly at the darkened sky above. Silent tears traced slow, shimmering paths down her dirt-streaked face, falling quietly into the puddles that had formed around her. Her breath was shallow, each inhale a strained effort that seemed to take more strength than she possessed. Her hands, small and fragile, rested limply by her sides, her fingers curled slightly in a gesture of surrender. She had no strength left to fight, no hope left to cling to. The pain, the hunger, the cold, they had worn her down to this moment of complete helplessness. Her body was weak, her spirit battered beyond recognition. She closed her eyes for a moment, as if shutting out the harsh reality around her, and in that silence, she whispered softly, almost inaudibly, a prayer, a plea to the heavens, a cry for mercy she couldn't voice aloud. Her lips moved in a trembling whisper, words lost in the storm's roar. "Please, if you are there, have mercy on me." Her voice was barely more than a breath, a fragile prayer carried away by the wind and rain. The girl's heart pounded painfully in her chest, each beat echoing the ache inside her. She looked up at the darkened sky, clouds swirling ominously, lightning flashing faintly in the distance, thunder rumbling like the voice of the heavens themselves. Her gaze was fixed on the heavens, eyes wide with longing and despair. She seemed to surrender entirely to the storm and her suffering, her small figure a fragile vessel of pain and hope intertwined. Her silent tears continued to fall, shimmering in the dim light, as she whispered her prayer again, her voice barely audible. "Please, I don't want to be alone. I just want to be loved." The words hung in the air, weighty and trembling, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Everything around her seemed to pause, an ominous stillness settling over the cold, rain-soaked street. The world waited in silent expectation, as if holding its breath for what was to come next. Her body was exhausted, her spirit seemingly broken, yet she remained there, silent, surrendered, vulnerable. Her eyes stared upward, searching the dark sky for some sign, some hope, some reassurance that she was not forgotten. Her small hands trembled as she clasped them together in a faint, trembling prayer, her head bowed low, her face streaked with tears and mud. It felt as if all the suffering of the world had converged in this one moment, her pain, her abandonment, her despair, and that perhaps now everything was about to come to an end. The storm raged on around her, lightning illuminating her trembling figure, thunder shaking the ground beneath her. But in the midst of that chaos, a profound silence settled, an almost sacred pause that stretched into eternity. The girl's breathing slowed, her eyelids fluttered as her body relaxed into surrender, and for a moment, there was only the sound of her quiet, trembling breath and the pounding rain. Her lips remained parted, her prayer unanswered yet still spoken from the depths of her wounded heart. She waited for the darkness to swallow her, for the storm to drown her, for the pain to finally end. She had given up fighting. She had surrendered to the night, to the storm, to her suffering. And in that silence, that suspended moment of desperation, the universe seemed to hold its breath, as if something unseen and divine was about to intervene. The moment stretched on, fragile and tense, as if waiting for a miracle that might never come. But in the stillness, in the quiet between thunderclaps, a divine presence was about to make itself known. Something beyond all understanding, something that would change everything. The girl's silent prayer was the last thing she could offer, a whisper into the vast, dark sky, before everything was about to shift forever. The rain continued to pour, relentless and unyielding, as if the heavens themselves were crying in sympathy for the girl lying helpless on the cold, muddy street. Her tiny frame was drenched from head to toe, her body trembling in the icy grip of the storm. Her silent tears still traced delicate paths down her face, mingling with the dirt and rain, as she whispered her desperate prayer into the darkness. She had surrendered everything, her strength, her hope, her very will to continue. Her eyes, glazed and tired, stared upward at the stormy sky, searching in vain for a sign, a reassurance that she was not forgotten in her suffering. Her hands clutched together weakly, trembling as she whispered again, "Please, please, just send help. I can't do this anymore." The world around her seemed frozen in time, the storm's fury holding everything captive. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the desolate scene with brief, blinding white. Thunder roared like the voice of the universe, shaking the ground beneath her trembling body. Yet amidst the chaos, a profound silence began to settle, a stillness so deep that it felt like the very fabric of reality was holding its breath. It was as if the storm itself paused, waiting for what was to come next. And then, suddenly, out of nowhere, a gentle, radiant light pierced through the darkness. It was soft at first, like a warm glow emerging from the shadows, but it grew brighter and more luminous with each heartbeat. The rain seemed to slow, as if the storm itself recognized the presence of something divine approaching. The air grew warmer, lighter, filled with a peace that contrasted sharply with the chaos around her. The girl's eyes widened, her exhausted gaze now fixed on the luminous figure appearing before her. It was Jesus. He arrived at the exact moment when no one expected. No fanfare, no thunderous announcement, just a silent, overwhelming presence of pure love and compassion. His light was gentle yet powerful, illuminating everything in its path, casting a golden glow that seemed to embrace her in a cocoon of divine mercy. His eyes, filled with tenderness and understanding, looked directly into hers. In that moment, she felt the weight of her suffering lift, replaced by a profound sense of peace she had never known before. Jesus knelt beside her, his face radiating warmth and compassion. His hands, gentle and strong, reached out to lift her fragile body from the cold ground. As he touched her, a wave of comfort washed over her, soothing her fears, quieting her pain. His presence was like a balm for her wounded soul, a tender reminder that she was loved beyond measure. The storm's fury seemed to fade into the background, replaced by the soft whisper of his voice, calm, reassuring, filled with divine kindness. "You are not alone," he said softly, his words like a gentle embrace in the midst of her despair. "I am here." His voice carried a depth of love so profound that it seemed to fill the very air around her. "Your suffering has not gone unnoticed. Hope is never lost." Tears of relief and awe streamed down her face, mingling with the rain that still fell. Her trembling hands reached out, seeking his touch, and when her fingers brushed his, she felt a warmth that penetrated her very core. It was as if a divine fire ignited within her, igniting a spark of hope that refused to be extinguished. Her heart, once battered and broken, now fluttered with a fragile but unwavering trust. In that sacred moment, the darkness seemed to retreat. The storm's chaos was quieted by the presence of love incarnate. Her tears turned from despair to tears of gratitude, tears that spoke of relief, of renewed faith, of a hope reborn. She looked into his eyes and saw the reflection of divine mercy, an eternal promise that no suffering is too great, no night too dark for his light to shine through. And as Jesus gently lifted her into his arms, the sky above seemed to shimmer with a heavenly glow. The rain softened into a gentle drizzle, as if nature itself was celebrating this divine encounter. The girl, in her fragile state, felt a profound peace settle over her, a peace that could only come from the presence of the Savior. She was cradled in his loving embrace, and in that moment, everything changed. The storm may have raged on outside, but inside her heart, a new dawn had begun. Hope had returned, stronger than ever, because she knew, beyond all doubt, that she was loved, protected, and forever held in the arms of her Savior. And in the quiet stillness that followed, her prayer was answered, not just in words, but in the divine, unending love that now filled her soul. The moment Jesus appeared, everything seemed to shift in an instant. The blind fury of the rain slowed, as if the storm itself was bowing in reverence to the divine presence now filling the space. The girl, trembling in his arms, felt an unexpected surge of strength, as if a gentle but powerful current had entered her very being. Her fragile body, which had been exhausted and broken by suffering, now felt lighter, steadier, alive with a new sense of hope and safety. Her trembling hands clung to him, not out of desperation alone, but with a quiet trust that grew stronger with each heartbeat. The divine peace that radiated from Jesus washed over her, soothing her pain and igniting a small but steadfast flame of courage within her heart. It was as if his presence had injected her with an unshakable assurance that she was seen, loved, and protected, no matter how cruel the world had been before. Her eyes, still filled with tears, now shimmered with gratitude, a silent acknowledgement that her suffering had not been in vain. Her whispered prayer had reached the heavens, and in that moment, the heavens had responded with overwhelming kindness. Meanwhile, the cruel adults who had abandoned her, Her stepmother and others who had turned their backs stood nearby, stunned into silence. Their faces, once twisted with cruelty and indifference, now showed shock, shame, and helplessness. They had thought their actions would leave her broken and forgotten forever. But witnessing this miracle, the divine embodiment of love and mercy, silenced their voices. They stared in disbelief as the radiant figure knelt beside the girl, shielding her from the storm and wrapping her in a divine embrace. Their hearts, hardened by selfishness and cruelty, now felt a strange churning, a mixture of shame and awe that they couldn't quite comprehend. They had believed their actions would forever silence her hope, but now they saw the impossible. Jesus, the embodiment of compassion, had come to rescue her. The sight of him, so full of mercy and divine power, cast a heavy shadow of conviction over them. They felt suddenly small, insignificant in the presence of divine love that radiated from Jesus. Their cruelty, once so confident, now seemed hollow and meaningless in the face of such pure grace. Their silence was deafening, echoing louder than any words could. They realized, perhaps too late, that their actions had not only caused suffering but had also awakened something far greater. An undeniable truth that love and mercy could triumph even in the darkest moments. The girl, cradled lovingly in Jesus' arms, felt her pain transform into strength. Her body, once fragile and trembling, now stood rooted in the divine assurance of his presence. She looked up into his eyes and saw a reflection of eternity, a reminder that she was not abandoned, that her suffering was understood and embraced by the divine. Her spirit, battered but resilient, was now soaring with renewed hope. She knew that her suffering had not been in vain. It had prepared her to receive this moment of divine intervention, this truth that love always prevails. As Jesus gently rose, his radiant light spilling over everything around, the storm's fury diminished. The dark clouds parted slightly, revealing a glimpse of a brighter sky, as if the heavens themselves rejoiced at this divine act of mercy. The rain softened into a drizzle, and the air was filled with a profound sense of peace, a peace that only the divine could bring. The cruel adults, unable to look away, felt a deep, uncomfortable shame settle over them. Their faces, once marked by cruelty and indifference, now reflected a strange mix of remorse and awe. They had thought their actions would forever silence her hope, but instead, they had unwittingly invited divine love into her life. The girl, now steady and radiant with faith, felt her heart swell with gratitude and courage. Her suffering had not gone unnoticed. It had been a part of a divine plan, a story of pain transforming into hope, cruelty giving way to compassion. The divine presence of Jesus had proved that love is stronger than any darkness, stronger than any cruelty. It had shown that even in the depths of despair, there is a divine light that can pierce through the gloom and bring new life. As he gently set her down and looked into her eyes one last time, Jesus' smile conveyed a silent promise. She was forever loved, forever protected. The storm's fury had subsided, but her hope had ignited into a blazing fire. Whatever evil had tried to silence her, now it was silenced forever in the face of divine mercy. Her suffering was not in vain, because love, the greatest power of all, had arrived to change everything. And in that moment, everyone saw, deep in their hearts, that nothing could ever truly defeat divine love. The rain had finally slowed, its relentless fury giving way to a gentle drizzle that seemed to carry a new sense of calm. The girl, once trembling in exhaustion and despair, now sat peacefully in the embrace of divine love. Her tiny frame, soaked in cold just moments before, was now wrapped in a soft, warm garment, an unseen blessing that seemed to have appeared with Jesus. Her face, streaked with tears and mud, was transformed. A gentle light flickered in her eyes, a spark of hope and renewal that had been absent for so long. Her cheeks, once pale and trembling, now carried a subtle glow of serenity. Her hands, which had trembled in fear and helplessness, rested calmly in her lap, no longer clutching to desperation but open to the peace that enveloped her. Her breathing was steadier, deeper. She had found a new strength inside her, rooted in the divine presence that had just touched her life. The pain and suffering that had once consumed her seemed to melt away, replaced by an overwhelming sense of love and acceptance. She was safe now, truly safe, and her heart was filled with gratitude she could hardly put into words. Her eyes looked upward, not with fear but with quiet trust, as if she knew she was held in the palm of God's infinite mercy. The divine light around her shimmered softly, illuminating her face with a gentle radiance, a reflection of the hope that had been reborn within her. Jesus had left her with a message that would stay in her heart forever. A message of love, of hope, of divine mercy. His words, spoken softly but with the weight of eternity, echoed in her soul. You are loved beyond measure. No suffering, no darkness, can ever separate you from the light of hope. Trust in love, for it is stronger than any storm. You are never alone. These words, simple yet profound, wrapped around her like a warm blanket, filling every corner of her being with peace and confidence. As she sat quietly, the storm clouds above continued to drift apart, revealing patches of blue sky and sunlight that shone through in gentle rays. Nature itself seemed to celebrate this moment of divine mercy, a reminder that even in the darkest storms, hope can break through and transform everything. The girl's face, now peaceful and radiant, reflected a silent promise. No matter how hard life may seem, divine love is always present, ready to restore, to heal, and to renew. Nearby, the adults who had cruelly abandoned her, the stepmother and others, stood at a distance. Their faces, still marked by shock and shame, looked on with a mixture of regret and awe. They had believed their actions would silence her forever, but instead, they had awakened a truth they could no longer deny. Love and mercy are powerfully divine forces that can change even the hardest hearts. Their silence spoke volumes, carrying the weight of realization, the recognition that their cruelty paled in comparison to the boundless love Jesus had shown her. The girl, now restored in body and spirit, turned toward the divine light that shone around her. Her heart was filled with a gentle assurance that she was forever held in a loving embrace, a promise that no one could take away her newfound hope. She had been broken, but now she was whole. She had suffered, but now she was healed. Her suffering had not been in vain. It had been a part of a divine plan, a story of pain transformed into hope, of darkness dispelled by divine light. Jesus had come, not just as a miracle, but as a message, a reminder that love is the greatest power of all, capable of restoring even the most shattered hearts. As he departed, his radiant presence left behind a lingering warmth, an unspoken message that hope and love are always near, waiting quietly to be recognized in our darkest moments. The sky above cleared further, revealing a peaceful, sunlit horizon, an open invitation to reflect on the divine goodness that surrounds us every day. The girl, now sitting peacefully, looked around with a heart full of gratitude. She knew her journey was not over, but she also knew she was no longer alone. The divine love she had encountered was a light that would guide her through every storm ahead. Her story was proof that even in the deepest suffering, hope can blossom anew when love steps in to heal. And so, I invite you to ask yourself, do you recognize Jesus' presence in your own darkest moments? Are you open to seeing the divine love that surrounds you, even when life feels most overwhelming? Because the truth remains, hope is always waiting to be rediscovered, and love is always ready to restore what has been broken. The question is, will you open your heart to receive it?